a countdown.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Good evening. We're going to start our Finance Committee meeting by having a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Let's now stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, tonight at our Finance Committee meeting, we have our committee, Brian Alston, Sean Reagan, Dr. Hilton, and myself, Cheryl Ray. We also have one of the subcommittee members, Stephen Kelly, here in person. We have Shiree Miller, another subcommittee member, virtually, and Dr. Ora Span is with us by telephone. We also have Jennifer Miller and Sam Myers virtually. And then in person, we have our superintendent, Dr. Mark Knox, and Amy Hanson, our administrative assistant. Did I get everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You did good.
All right. I'd like to call our meeting to order. And our first item is the approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm having trouble with my computer here. I'm sorry to hold up the show, but I can't seem to get what's going on here. Okay. What's going on then? I signed in just like always. I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right. Well, the first thing we want to do is the approval of the agenda. That was sent to you ahead of time, and if there's no objection, we will consider the agenda approved. Any objections? Okay. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda, and we'll do the same thing there. If we've
I did all this.
had time to read that ahead. If there are no objections, we will accept the consent agenda. All right. Our next item starts with our superintendent's report. And so, Dr. Martin Knox, I'll let you start that.
You got to.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chairwoman, Mrs. Ray. Good afternoon, or evening, shall I say, to members of the Finance Committee and the subcommittee. At this time, I'd ask Ms. Miller, our Chief Financial Officer, to report out on 4.1 from the Office of Finance, the update on the general fund revenue and expenditures through June 30th, 2021.
Yes, good evening, Chairwoman Ray, Finance Committee members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, we have the June 30th, 2021 revenue and expenditures for the general fund as of October 18th, 2021. There was no change in the revenue from last month's report, and the total projected revenue is $129,171,894. Moving on to page 2, we have posted the one-time retention stipend along with a few minor adjustments, and the overall projected change in expenditure is approximately $150,000 less than last month's projection, which brings the total projected expenditures to $124,519,954. There was no change in other financing sources from last month's projections, and the overall change in fund balance as of June 30th, 2021 is $7,252,353, which brings the general fund balance to $32,626,731, slightly over 3 months operating expenditures. at this time, I'll take any questions on the June 30th figures.
Dr. Hilton.
Is there any way, we have our subcommittee members here who don't have a computer. Is there any way, or do we have a hard copy of any of this, or can it be put up on the screen?
I can put it on.
You got a hard copy?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
I can put it on the
Mr.
screen.
Kelly, do you?
Amy,
I don't, I should have printed mine off
I gave him
or
my-
brought my computer.
Okay, okay. He's got the
Amy.
I can
computer.
put it on the screen.
my computer's still not working, honey, I don't know what's the matter. I'm not holding my mouth right tonight,
Okay,
so,
hold on just a second.
or either Mr. Reagan is, mad at me again and won't let my computer work right.
Okay, I do have a question, Ms. Miller. And this will, sort of go into the next presentation too. On our expenditures with the salaries, did we have any vacancies from last year? Were those taken out, or how do we arrive at the salary amount? And were the vacancies considered, or is that where we ended up with, including vacancies?
Yes, ma'am. Column 3 is the actual expenditures as of June 30th. So those figures are the actual amount that was spent. So if we had a vacancy, we did not spend it, so that is not in those numbers because that was a vacancy and funds were not spent.
Okay, so that would not be in that column where it says the original budgeted.
They would be in the original column, first column, yes, ma'am.
So that,
And that's why we came in under budget, is because of those vacancies.
but it was only $490,000.
That's just taking, yes, ma'am, that was from the original budget. You have to remember, we put the stipend in here as well. So you're not seeing the true vacancy, that's the net difference between the vacancies and the stipend.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay.
All right, moving on to the next on the agenda is the September 30th, 2021 general fund revenues and expenditures. There's no significant changes made to the projected revenue. As such, revenue is projected to be $129,768,534. And then moving down to expenditures, we are continuing to evaluate payroll projections and will adjust when values are more solid as we continue to seek employees to fill our vacancies. Salary figures could vary significantly. As we mentioned previously, we outsourced instructional services, so code 311, and those are more costly than salaries and benefits of an employee. So we are projecting that we're gonna go over budget in that category, which will be offset by coming in under budget in salaries. And at this time, we're projecting a loss of $497,000 for this year, but again, those amounts are going to fluctuate as we proceed through the year.
Okay, any questions? All right, I have a couple of questions, and either Dr. Mark Knox, you or Ms. Miller can answer. What are our staff vacancies up to this point?
So the last time we had a discussion about vacancies for teacher vacancies, I know there are 77 teacher vacancies at this time, but that number changes on a day-to-day basis. We have staff that exit, and we also are hiring at the same time. So the last time I had the discussion, which was Monday, Tuesday, it was at 77.
That's actual teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Have you looked at the, class sizes and done any kind of analysis of the needs to determine whether all of these vacancies are necessary?
So looking at our class sizes of course fluctuate, and it also is dependent upon the schools. So across the district, class sizes seem to be okay in some of our schools. And it also is dependent upon the classes that are being offered. So I know for a fact that one of our schools is going to probably use Title I to reduce class sizes because they have a large number of classes that are over what the recommendations of the state are in terms of student to teacher ratio. And so with that particular school, they have the appropriate number of teachers allocated for the student enrollment. However, for the course offerings, it is not. So we do have some overcrowded classes, but we continue to analyze our classes in the schedules that are developed and built within our schools, whether they're on a block schedule, whether they're on a 6-period day schedule. It varies and fluctuates from school to school. One of the conversations we're gonna have moving forward is looking at our schedules to make sure that we're optimally using our teaching staff to meet the needs of our students. So we do continue to evaluate that.
Okay. And one of the reasons I'm asking this is, we never have completed our discussion about the salary scales and looking at our needs to increase the salaries of teachers and hopefully the other staff members again this year. So I was wondering, as you're looking at those things, do you have a plan to determine how much salary we might could increase and ways to get the revenue, or how are you gonna approach county council next spring when we want more money?
We've touched the surface of that, but we will continue moving forward to look at that to make sure that we are asking for the appropriate amount to meet the needs of our kids in our district. So that is an ongoing discussion. Yes, ma'am, great question.
And I think that's a priority because we do wanna get the salaries as high as we can afford to. And we also want to discuss with the full board how to get our salary schedules
Yes, ma'am.
like we need them to be. I know we've had a little bit of discussion about that, so that's one of the recommendations I wanted to make tonight, that we finish that discussion. I think we approached it and did not make a determination, so we don't want to leave you hanging with that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other questions?
Just one quick one. This is probably coming more from ignorance than anything. The 77 teacher vacancies, is that high, is that low, is that, what kind of percent turnover may we be seeing in that population?
So it is an unusual year, it's unusual times. We have teachers who are making the determination to go into other fields. And we have teachers who are determining that they're going to retire at this particular point in time for various reasons. It is high at this particular point in time. What we do is, when we are analyzing, we look at where we were last year and the year before last at this time, and it is higher than what it has been. But we are continuing to actively recruit, and the uniqueness about the space that we're in right now is everybody's fighting for the same staff. I just had superintendent's meeting today, and that was one of the questions that was posed to all the superintendents. What do your vacancies look like? And you could hear the groans across the room. So whether it's bus drivers, food services, just staff, period, in the field of education and across the nation, we're all fighting for the same thing. So we are, again, establishing recruiting dates. We're continuing to do so in a virtual capacity. We're touching bases with our local colleges and universities and across the state, so that we can capture those December graduates, because they're about to come out of school. And so instead of us waiting until after they graduate to say, hey, look at us, we're trying to recruit and put ourselves out there before that even occurs. So we're continuing to find creative ways to attract individuals to Sumter School District.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my line of work, I work for an insurance company, and we had a team meeting yesterday, had the same conversation around competition for talent and trying to keep people in current roles, and how do you do that? And so I just was wondering if it was the same context for school district.
I think that's why looking at the salaries is so important, because we have so much competition just right in this area. Even if somebody lives here in Sumter, they can drive a little bit further and have an increase in their salary. Yes.
Along these lines, talking about these vacancies and capturing these December graduates, we've had some discussion in the past about trying to streamline the hiring process, because it seems like we've heard from various sources that sometimes we have a candidate that a school or a principal might be interested in, and then before we can pull the trigger, so to speak, they are snapped up by somebody else. So I would encourage you to speak to the folks in personnel, so that when we are trying to fill these vacancies and capture these December graduates, as you put it, that we have streamlined the process so that we don't lose people to other places because our process is, more complicated, slower, more cumbersome, whatever word you wanna use, than others might have in other places.
And so, thank you for that, Dr. Hilton, and we have touched on that. One of the things I can say that Ms. McCants Walters has actually done is she's partnered with many of the other districts just to find out what strategies they use so we can continue to streamline our processes. Whether it's here in South Carolina or in other states, she has made those connections to see what we can do to further enhance our process and to continue to accelerate. And so while we continue to be competitive with local school districts, we're also competitive with one another here in the district. And so I'll just give you an example of something that was shared with me when we did the virtual job fair. Yeah, Ms. Ray came through and she interviewed with you, she interviewed Mr. Kelly, she interviewed, and then she has to interview with all those principals, and then one of the principals, all three of the principals wanted her, and it's up to the candidate to make the decision as to.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that one of the principals said, why can't I just do my interviews by myself? And I said, I wish, right? And so that, you know, we're trying to attract for our district, but it does become a competitive piece within the district as well. And so there are times where we have a candidate who's just amazing, and everybody thinks that person is amazing, and everybody wants them, but then it's up to the candidate to make that choice. And so sometimes there've been conversations that say, well, they interviewed with me on Tuesday, and they interviewed with you on Wednesday and Thursday, I had you first. So, you know, it's time to make those difficult and challenging decisions, which is left up to the candidate. So there are some things that we've done to shift, to accelerate the process, but also making sure we hit every nook and cranny to make sure we do the criminal background check, to make sure their credentials are in alignment, and all those other factors that go with it. And then we've also, just like Ms. Ray just said a few moments ago, we have candidates who are out there actively interviewing, and they may interview with school district A, B, and C, and we may have already had our hands on them, but when District A comes along and there's a difference of $10,000 in the salary, we're not even in the running. They're going to take that other district. So there are a lot of other factors, but we are trying very diligently to make sure we streamline, to your point.
Yeah, the salary question was gonna be part of what, like, how do we compare to Clarendon, Kershaw, Orangeburg, Northeast Richland County schools? I assume that those are our main Orangeburg, like, local competition for teacher talent. I have no idea how our salaries compare to those other districts.
So we've looked at that, we've done some analysis, and there's a difference between $5,000 to $12,000 difference from local LEAs. And most recently, there are also sign-on bonuses. There are some districts that are doing $500 sign-on bonuses, and there are some districts that are doing $5,000 sign-on bonuses. So we're competing with that as well. So we're competing with the salaries that are being offered as well as the bonuses that are being offered. And then there's also sometimes the proximity to where that individual may reside that also comes into play as well. But to your point, 5 to 12 is what we see in terms of the range.
Ms. Bruner, and let me say, Ms. Leslie Bruner has joined us in person, so you have a question?
I do. So will the salary schedules be up to a competitive level by the time the December grads are ready for work, ready for hire?
So that is a conversation we're still engaged in. So the answer to that, just being upfront, it's probably no. But we are working towards making sure we are competitive locally.
Okay. Any other questions?
When you say competitive locally, what do you mean by that?
With our local LEAs, our neighbors, our neighboring school districts, making sure that we are able to compete with the salaries that are
But
offered by.
we're not, we're lower than our neighbors.
Well, she said, will we be there by December? And I said, no.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're lower than our neighbors and we won't be there in December, unfortunately.
Correct.
Yeah.
I wish.
Anything else? Okay. All right, Ms. Miller, you wanna go
Are
ahead?
we back to Jennifer?
Yeah,
She's on 4.3 now.
right.
Ms. Miller, are you ready for 4.3? I'm sorry, we were having robust conversations here.
No problem. The last thing this evening is our capital projects, and you should have funds 519 through 527 in front of you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those.
Ms. Miller, I'd like you to review, we have a couple of these funds that, you know, have deadlines that we have to spend by. Would you just address that again for everybody about what happens if you don't spend the funds? by the
Yes,
date?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There are deadlines from when we issue the bond to when we have to have the funds spent by. And it's called an arbitrage rebate calculation. And basically, to summarize what that is the IRS says, we've given you these bonds at a, discounted interest rate. And we want you to spend those funds, not just have the funds sitting in a bank account earning interest off of them. And so if you do not spend them at the time that they require it, then they do a calculation, and it's not a tax, but it basically is a way for them to get back money, for the difference because you did not spend the funds. And the calculation that I can't give you an exact percentage, it's just based off of the remaining funds based on the original issuance. So you'll notice at the top of each of these, we have a, spend by period of time based on when it was issued. So by 3 years from when it was issued, we would want to have those spent.
But we don't lose money because of our interest, is that correct?
That's correct. We are still earning more of the money than we have paid in interest, so we're still, we're just not maximizing what we could have earned because we do have to pay a portion back.
Right, I just wanted, if anybody saw that they would understand, what's happened with that. All right. So any questions so far? All right, then I'll ask my question. On Fund 524, and I know you probably gave us this in the other handout, but I didn't go through all those pages. What, cover awning, what school is that for? Because I know the awnings got finished at R.A. Davis, right?
Yes, ma'am. Ms.
So
Meyer,
the-
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jen, Ms. Miller, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna let you know, based on the last 3 digits of the account number, we can tell which location it is.
Okay,
Grab a sheet of paper real quick. And so that first one is 03. So that's gonna be the location of where that awning would be. And Mr. Myers,
well, this one's.
correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that one would be Furman. The next one is R.E. Davis, and then the 42 would be, one of the high schools, which is going to be Crestwood.
Okay. And you know I'm gonna ask for an update on the trailer removal. That's in
Absolutely.
this file here.
Absolutely. So, I'm going to touch it, and Mr. Myers, unless you want to. So this has been the saga of the removal of the trailers. And so we actually went through the process where we put the trailers out for bid for those that could be removed. We had individuals who bid on them, purchased them, but then there were a few that were bid on and never retrieved. We had given them several notifications, and I don't know if either of you have the dates of those, but we had given them several notifications to come and retrieve the portables, or we would have to reimburse them and do something else with the portables. We had to seek legal counsel, of course, because they had already purchased it, and we wanted to make sure we weren't violating anything. The individual had said they were coming to get them and never came to get them. We sent out another notification to come and retrieve them, and they were not retrieved. As we were moving forward, we then had to do an RFP for someone to do the demolition of the trailers or the cottages, because no one had come to pick them up after we had bid them out. And then after we went through that process, we realized that we had to go through another process to ensure that there was no asbestos, if you will, in the units, because if they demolished those with asbestos in it, it would cause a more detriment to our ozone and our air quality. And so we had to go through that process, and now we've finished all of that. The gentleman was actually out at a school yesterday when I was at a school looking at the trailers. They're getting ready to begin the process of demolishing them. Did I say anything wrong, miss anything? You wanna add anything? You both are shaking.
You're absolutely right, and they're scheduled to start next week, demolishing.
And what schools we talking here?
Kingsbury, Lamira, and
Wow.
Wilder.
Croswell and Wilder, Kingsbury and Lamar.
And just to clarify, these were the portables they used for classrooms way back, and they've just been sitting there, unusable
Yes,
really, so, and they were in the way.
Yes,
so,
ma'am.
Yes,
You mean to tell me somebody paid for it and then didn't come get it,
That's correct.
and we had to give them their money back?
We gave them their monies back, correct?
That is correct.
But that was after several reminders to come and get them, if not by this date, but seeking legal counsel, of course, and just being transparent, we gave them their money back. We had no reason to keep their money because they never came to get the product.
Any other questions on that or anything on that fund? And then I have a question. I noticed in several of the funds, we have things that address athletic fields, fencing. 526, says something about the fencing at athletic fields. And we had a little discussion about, Title IX. I wondered what the plan was to update the high school athletic fields to get them in compliance with Title IX.
Yes, ma'am. So several things had occurred. When it was first brought to my attention about some of the needs in our fields, it began with the softball dugout, I believe, at Lakewood. That matter was resolved. It's been resolved, and so they have that. The other piece is Mr. Myers actually walked through with someone who's an expert in the Title IX, and a list has been created with those things that we can get done in the immediate. And I know that we started with the painting of the dugouts. And what are some of the other things, Mr. Myers?
Two of the things that are going to occur very soon will be the painting of the dugouts, baseball dugouts and softball, and distribution of gravel dust that will go behind the plate and in front of the dugouts. Those are two things that we can do right away.
And just given a couple of items, I don't have the list in front of me, but some of the other items that we will be satisfying in the immediate from your walkthrough.
Yes, ma'am. Some of the things that we will be able to do right away will be adding speakers to all of the fields, especially for the softball fields, because the baseball fields have speakers. Softball fields do not, and we can install those. In addition, the baseball fields have secured pitching areas, warm-up areas, and the softball areas do not. We're going to apply fencing that will match the baseball fields in that regard. We're making sure that the fields themselves are appropriate for drainage as far as the softball fields to match those with the baseball fields. We're now looking at scoreboards where they're much different on the baseball fields than they are on the softball fields. So those are some of the things that we can do in the immediate future to make sure that all of that is in a line and no one group is getting ahead of the other.
And what we've used, in addition to Mr. Myers walking through, what was that, about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you did the walkthrough?
About a month ago, yes.
Okay. And so we've used the data collected from the walkthrough that Mr. Myers participated in, but we also used the valuable tool of the facility study. In the facility study, there are items that have been identified back in 2018 that should have been satisfied or needs to be satisfied as it relates to upgrading our fields. And there are some things that are much heftier and that need to be done. They need to be done. And we are creating a plan to make sure we are able to do so.
So you'll have a timeline and then we'll know where the funds are gonna come from out of those,
Yes, ma'am.
okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
I do have a question. On the matter of the Title IX issues with our athletic facilities at our high schools, did the district fall out of compliance or were these fields constructed out of compliance? Because, I mean, our newest facilities will be Crestwood and Lakewood, and that's over 20 years old. So were they always out of compliance, or is this something that just occurred?
well, I know, for example, Lakewood added things later, so it might have been put
So-
out of compliance then.
And so when we look at, again, examine the facility study, we saw that there was, like Ms. Ray just said, there has been work done over the years. I think what has happened is a combination of a couple of things. Materials have deteriorated over the years. Things have been upgraded in terms of Title IX and the compliance piece over the years. But when we look at it, these are things that have to be updated for us to be in compliance. So we didn't fall out of compliance. There's actually a checklist that is utilized to ensure that we are staying within those guidelines. Because remember, Title IX is about the equitable piece. And so it depends on which athletic programs exist at our schools. And I don't know if the programs have always been there or not, but they're there now. And so we have to make sure we're satisfying it. But I can go back to, again, the facility study, and the recommendations of that facility study was for us to upgrade some of these items. And we're trying to satisfy those recommendations at this particular point in
I
time.
asked that question considering that I know when there's additions to our school facilities, it has to go through the Office of School Facilities. I was just asking that question because is there any timeline of how long that this issue has existed? Was it approved by the Office of School Facility for these additions or these changes to be made at those athletic facilities, or these were district level changes that took place that now have us out of compliance?
I can do research on that and find that answer.
Thank you.
And I had one more thing to bring up too. Just as, you know, I go to some of the games at Sumter High, and there's an area that you walk over to go to the fields that is full of glass. I don't know where that glass came from, but I mean, it's like a huge area. And I didn't know if y'all were aware of that, and if anything had been planned to, I mean, it almost would take, taking all that dirt out, and you couldn't get it up, it's just, but I don't know how long it's been there, probably years, but it's one of those areas that you walk across to get to the athletic fields.
You mean it's in the parking lot?
No, it's not the parking lot, it's on a grassy area.
You familiar with that, Mr. Myers?
I'm not, I'll have to take a look at that.
Is there somebody who can take us specifically?
I'm sure the athletic director is aware of it, but I was walking, you know, when I go to games, I just happened to be in the area and I saw that there was a lot of glass there, and I think it's still there, but it's been
Okay.
there a long time.
That's at the
Okay.
high school, not at the football stadium, you're talking about at the high school.
Yeah, cause I go to, you know, they have the softball and baseball games there, so it's adjacent to the baseball field, I think.
Mr. Myers, can you touch bases with Curtis, Mr. Johnson, to see?
I'll do that.
I don't know
Yes.
where that came from, but,
Thank you for sharing that.
okay.
I was not aware of that.
One more question.
Okay.
With our funds, I know we had a discussion about the marquees at the schools, and the list was presented, the prioritization of the list. Have those signs been ordered, or are they in the works of selection or something of that sort?
I know, Ms. Cook has started the process with doing bids. Mr. Myers, Ms. Miller, can you jump in here about the, I see you looking, Ms. Miller. I know I've had a conversation with Mr. Myers and Ms. Cook, about the marquees. Where are we with those?
We have reached out to several sign companies looking for, getting some quotes issued to us for at least two of the ones that aren't in place. And we are inspecting all of the ones that we have, all of the marquees that we have, and we're wanting to make sure that all of the ones that they are in really good shape. And right now, we're just making sure we can get the appropriate quotes so we can move forward and make sure that occurs.
And we did submit the list like you indicated, and so we know we have schools that don't have one, we have schools that are falling apart, and so we wanna address those first, and then we'll go back and look at those that may need more modernized signs or larger signs. I know we've had conversations about signs needing to be larger as well. So if that's a recommendation, we can go back, because we need to have a go-ahead for the signs that we have shared that need the work.
And I would just add one thing, Dr. Martin Knox, is just making sure we follow procurement with something like that. As we look at the dollar values on those quotes, we may have to do a formal bid, to proceed with this.
Did that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and I promise this will be the last time I ask about this, the Sumter Academy renovations. I got what you sent us about, what made it go over budget, and, wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but that's okay. And I think y'all explained this last meeting, but where did we move the money from to cover the overage?
So what happened in the beginning of the process, and for those who are new to the committee, when we forecast work that needs to be done, we work with specialists, architects, if you will, and we come up with a dollar figure to put out a proposal with that dollar figure. We have companies that will put in bids for the work, and then they will identify what the cost is going to be from their perspective. Well, we forecasted 300, was it 310, Ms. Miller?
Sorry, I'm looking right now.
We forecasted about 3 with the feedback that we'd received. But when we put the bid out, all of the companies exceeded that by an extra 100 and some odd $1,000. And so the lowest bid is usually the lowest bidder, who's also able to do the work and has the referrals to do it. Those are the ones that we usually lean toward. And so it's not necessarily going over budget, we just under budgeted for that work. And so what we did is within the budget, there were projects that the reverse happened. We said that they would go at a certain dollar figure, but they came under the dollar figure. And so what we did is we moved those dollars from other functions within the facilities piece, within the capital projects, thank you. And we used that money to satisfy the difference of what we projected versus what the companies had projected. And so we were able to satisfy that with moving monies within a function. Ms. Miller, is there anything you would like to add to what I said if I didn't mess it up?
No, you did great. The original budget was 300,000. That was just a ballpark estimate, and then when we got the quotes, it came in over that amount, and so we were able to shift funds from projects that closed and got it straight.
What was the difference? 140?
143 was the difference.
Okay, thank you.
So, if I could follow up on that. So the funds were shifted from some of these same funds that we're looking at here, from capital projects?
Yes, sir.
Okay, did the board know that these funds were being shifted from one project that had money left over in it to this other project, or were we supposed to know, or what's the protocol for shifting from one project to another project when you have money left over in an account?
For the capital projects, there's not a board policy that the board has to approve the shifting of the funds. The board does approve the original budget. And historically, as long as the projects are being completed, if you come in under on other projects, those funds are used to offset projects that go over. Because it is just an estimate when we propose the budget.
And just to piggyback on that, although she said we don't have to, I shared that information with the board in one of my briefings to show that we had transferred the monies from function. And I believe I put, Amy, can you pull the date for that one? And it's been so long, it's been over a year, whatever, I can't remember the date, but we did notify.
Thank you. That's
And we
okay.
also,
That's okay, Amy, thank you.
All right, and,
did that answer, I'm sorry, Ms.
yeah.
Ray.
Thank you. And the last question I have, is, well, next to the last, I'll put that way. It was an update on, the work orders. You told us that y'all were putting a system in place, so where are we with that?
So we talked about it last night, during the facilities, committee meeting. We talked about the difference between track it and school duty. And so what has been happening is, within a schoolhouse, we may have the principal, the building service worker, and the building service supervisor all putting in a work order. We have a system called School Dude, where if there's a need for work in a schoolhouse, they will submit those work orders through this process, this platform, and it sends notification to the facilities, to the operations department. Our staff, whomever it is responsible for that work, will then go to the school to look at it, to examine it, to repair it, or to even put in for a bid if it exceeds a certain dollar amount for us to satisfy the work. What we had been recognizing is that there were multiple requests for the same assignment, which made it look like work wasn't being completed. So if Ms. Ray responded to a school, she would go in and satisfy and then go back to the office and then put the information as being complete. But it would only show that there was one item being complete when there were 3 or 4 that may have been for that same project. The other thing that was occurring is what we recognize is that sometimes, our leaders in our schools want what's best for kids, and they would call instead of putting it in school due. And then our service folks, being as committed as they are, would stop what they were doing and go to do whatever that call was for them at that particular school. So what we've asked is that principals continue to put items into school due. If it is an emergency and an emergent need, there is a button within the program that you click and it'll say that it's an emergency. But if it's a true emergency, they are going to pick up the phone call. They're going to pick up the phone to call. They're going to call the chief of schools. They're going to call Mr. Myers. They're going to call Mr. Cato. They may even still call our operations staff just to get the work done. So we've been going through them and we've been looking at the number of work orders that have been satisfied and not satisfied to make sure that they're being complete. So we have been looking at those numbers. There's also another piece that we are cleaning up as well, because we have another program called Track It, which is for computer stuff. And that is with Mr. Jonas and his team. And so I'll have a principal say, I put in a work order for these computers to be picked up, but it's not a work order, it's a ticket through Track It. And so we're using language interchangeably. Nevertheless, there's work that needs to be done when they're putting those orders in. We need to make sure that our staff are responsive to that. And so today, actually, Dr. Hafner sent out a reminder to principals in her weekly update to share with principals to make sure they are utilizing school due, and there's one person that's designated within the schoolhouse to put those orders in, so that we don't have our staff reporting to complete the same project that has already been addressed or someone else is already going to look at.
So have you been able to get that pretty much on track now, or?
We are. Mr. Myers, would you like to chime in with that, to say anything in addition to what I've just shared?
Done an excellent job, Dr. Martin Knox. But yes, we are working to make sure that all of those work orders are addressed, and just like Dr. Martin Knox says, we want to make sure that we're addressing all of those, and sometimes they do try to address the ones that are called in, and it delays some of the others, but we're working to make sure we can keep all of those in check.
And I will give credit, a lot of credit to our service, just as we talked about earlier, Mr. Kelly, because we've been short-staffed there as well. We've had illnesses, they have been working very, very hard to make sure that we are complying with the requests as we're receiving them.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, and that really was my last question. Does anyone else have a question, or our subcommittee? I know we've thrown out a lot of things that maybe you haven't been familiar with, or any of our virtual members. Any other questions?
I do have a question, but I'll yield to.
Oh, you could have.
I have a question. I know that since the pandemic, we have come to appreciate, or not so much appreciate, broadband access in the district. Has there been any conversation? I know that there's been some issues with schools with having connectivity issues. Has there been any discussion or conversations around looking at other service providers to offer internet service to schools, or to expand that? Or I know it was a conversation that we had some time ago as a board about working with county council or with city council to address broadband connectivity across the county and across the city. Is that something that we've been looking at? Because I know, we have a one-to-one approach, and everyone is utilizing Chromebooks, and having schools that may have connectivity issues is going to be problematic. Or how do we address that moving forward?
So it is a big discussion, and I have had conversation. I know that there are grants out there that are slated to come to Sumter for us to expand or enhance our broadband. Where we are with that, I have not had dialogue within the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but it has been brought up as we are looking to expand the opportunities here in Sumter. But we are continuing to make sure that our students have MiFis, and we continue to have our partnerships with our local businesses. But as you indicated, with everybody being on it, it does slow down the process a great deal. I know Mr. Jonas and his team have worked diligently to ensure that we are upgrading those systems. I know that he's put tickets in and he's working closely with our providers to ensure that we don't experience those disruptions, but they are continuing to occur because we are on Wi-Fi much more than what we have been previously.
And I just wanted to say, I know we as a board had that conversation about working with county council or city council as well, and I just wanted to see if that was something that we could maybe have more discussion with the full board on, of establishing that relationship to discuss broadband in the county and across the city.
There are some particular schools that are having trouble too?
Yes, ma'am, we have one school in particular whose broadband access is slow. And we've been working with the company to see what we can do to satisfy that. It really is, and it's actually a hindrance instructionally because there are some programs that we've purchased for our teachers and they cannot get on because of the slowness of the broadband.
Just because of the location of the school, is that the problem, or what?
From what I understand, it's probably the location of the school, but it is also the the location.
And what's available in that location?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that is important because, as the winter comes on and our weather is gonna be changing, and that's supposed to be how we address instruction,
Yes, ma'am.
going to the virtual, so that'll be a problem for us.
And if we look at what instruction looks like in a school, the challenges that our staff face, our teachers face, all we have to do is go back and look at some of our meetings where there's an overcast and it'll show that it's not responsive, the internet is slow, and you'll see it buffer and then it'll come back. So when you're a child and you're sitting in that seat and it's occurring, it's very challenging for a teacher to keep a child's interest and engagement when there's that intermittent disruption throughout the class period.
And then at their homes too.
That too, yes, ma'am.
Having one of those children, I can relate.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, virtual did not suit everybody.
That's right.
All right, anything else needs to be brought up?
And we are continuing to fund the MiFis because we were able to use a funding source for that. That source has stopped, but we're continuing to make sure students have access to MiFis.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can we just make sure that information is put out there to the public? I mean, for anyone that may need access to it. I'm pretty sure it's already out there, but can we just like bring
Do it again?
Yes.
Sure.
And just push it out again.
Ms. Miller, you have that from Mr. Jones? Never mind.
You want me to push out that the Wi-Fi's aren't available in the house?
Good job, Ms. Miller.
I actually was writing push information.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Miller, Mr. Myers, and Dr. Mark Knox for the information you've given us tonight. Is there anything else y'all need to share?
No, ma'am. I just want to say thank you all for your support to the subcommittee, bringing your ideas and your thoughtfulness to the table. We do appreciate it.
Okay. All right, so next on our agenda are the recommendations, and if the committee's in agreement with this, I wanted to recommend that the board chairwoman request a presentation on the current salary scales and the changes needed, and also how the administration wants to accomplish the task, and then the plan to see what we can do about salary increases. That's a recommendation you would agree we could make.
Mhm.
And also, I'd like to request the chairwoman to request that the Title IX plan be presented when it's completed and with a timeline, so we'll know where we are with that. And we'll go ahead and also ask for a discussion on the broadband situation with, and working with other entities in the county. We can do that also.
And there wasn't this on discussion in the state legislature regarding broadband,
I thought so, I thought we were.
that there was some money, supposed to be allocated to improve broadband in rural areas that had come to light as a result of the pandemic and schools going virtual. Maybe we need to look into that as well. Where's the state in providing funding for improved rural broadband?
And you know, that was so upfront when everybody was having to be at home, and that
Right.
kind of gone by the
So where-
wayside now,
yeah,
because I didn't
where-
realize the schools.
Right, where are we now? Where's that money now? Or when is the money coming? Or what is?
And it's bigger than just the rural areas. I mean, even in sections of the city, the connectivity in certain sections of the city is not the best. So you'll have dead zones in the city as well with internet connectivity and using Wi-Fi there as well.
Every time I go right down here on Wilson Hall Road, through that little swamp right there, my cell phone's right there. You know what I'm talking about? Right over here, right over here. You know what I'm talking about?
Just on what you're.
You go through the four-way stop, go down that hill, and it drops you right there, every time. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Just
Well, maybe
re-
we can fix
Just
that.
reaffirming what they said.
Right.
I thought it was just my provider.
No,
Yeah.
Well.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight, either in person or virtually or on the telephone, and thank you for the input, and again, thank the staff and Dr. Martin Knox for, their, willingness to answer all our questions and the answers that they provided. All right, well, that will conclude our meeting, so we will adjourn at 6:52.
Records.
Yeah.